Hello, this project is a job evaluation project at South Downs College. My name is Dennis Crowe and I was the reward consultant for this project. I'd like to introduce Becky from South Downs.
I'm Becky Avery. I'm Assistant Principal at South Downs College. I'm responsible for Human Resources and Organisational Development. And I was the lead as far as the job evaluation project was concerned, working very closely with Dennis from Pilat.
Thank you, Becky. Can we start perhaps with just going back to the beginning and, what was the purpose of this, or what was the lead-in to this project? Why did it have to be done?
Sure, okay. So going back to 2014, at that time we had harmonised some pay rates for hourly paid staff. And we worked with the trade unions on that point. And we had actually identified at that time that there was no job evaluation, no formal scheme in place for the college. And it's something that we shared with the trade unions as far as sort of aspiration was concerned, to actually ensure that we did implement something in time for 2015. So that was one part of the sort of rationale for taking the project forward. The context financially was challenging as well. And sector-wide, it is a very challenging time. There's lots of government cuts as far as funding is concerned for the FE sector. So we were having to respond to that. And also the college had commissioned an external benchmarking company to come in. And the outcome of that benchmarking exercise identified that our pay-to-income ratio was running very high at 74%. So that's something that we had to reduce to an acceptable level. And also the benchmarking data indicated that our average teaching pay rates were significantly above sector norms. And that again was something that was pushing up our pay-to-income ratio. So financial sustainability was a key objective as far as the project was concerned.
Yes, thank you. We used two things, didn't we? We used the Association of Colleges job evaluation scheme, which is signed off, if you like, at national level by the employers and trade unions. And then we used WebGauge, which is Pilat's job evaluation software. Can we perhaps just briefly touch on why what were the benefits of using Pilat's web software?
Okay. So we identified that 150 post holders needed to be seen as part of the project to ensure that we collected adequate data to be able to model. So significant number of interviews to conduct. The advantage of WebGauge is that actually all of that data can be collected during an hour and a half interview with the role holder. And experience of other job evaluation schemes indicates actually that's quite an unusual benefit to have in a sense, that there wasn't much follow-on work after the interview itself. So that allowed us really in quite a short period of time to really work through those 150 interviews, and an hour and a half was adequate time to go through the questionnaire and actually collect the information there and then with the job holder.
Yes. And in terms of staff consultation, there were regular meetings with staff, there were regular job evaluation committee meetings and so on. Can you just describe that process a little?
Yeah, of course. So we established a job evaluation steering group very early on in the project. In fact, before we'd actually decided which job evaluation scheme we were going to use. So we on the steering group had our reps from recognised trade unions. We had other sort of key stakeholders as far as managers and HR members of the HR team were concerned. So they were key in terms of steering that project forward. And so right from the point of actually deciding which scheme we would be using, and then every step of the way from there on. So, for example, when we were selecting the sample that would represent and collect the data from, right through to moderation of the data and finally to outcomes of the project itself. And then throughout that time as well, we had a communications plan in place and for all staff, to ensure that they were kept abreast in terms of what the project was and the key milestones of the project itself.
Yes. And you had a key sponsor from the college, from the principal of the college.
Yeah.
And there were regular meetings with the senior leadership team, of which you're a member. So that was a process of keeping them in the loop, as well as the governors as well. They were kept informed.
They were, yeah. So at the college we have an HR committee of governors, and again throughout the project they were kept abreast of reasons why we needed to address certain issues, the context, and also the practicalities of we moving forward in terms of the milestones that we were reaching. So they were very much, that was quite a topic of discussion during that year as far as the HR committee were concerned. Yeah.
In terms of the timeline, you mentioned 2015 as the start, and I think the project was completed in about 8 months, which is very, very quick in my experience, and very, very commendable. What was the, how did you manage to do that so effectively?
Okay, so much of that was around planning, I would say. So we knew it's quite a tight timeline. So we had to really carefully identify where the key milestones were, and part of the steering group was really ensuring that we were meeting those key milestones. We also planned in for potential disruption, if you like, to the consultation process. Because of because we were changing terms and conditions, sometimes in a less favourable way for some staff. We anticipated that there would be some consultation and negotiation with the unions, and that indeed did happen. Anticipating those things and then monitoring them as we went through was absolutely vital.
Yes. You mentioned terms and conditions. I mean, you also changed contracts of employment, didn't you? They came in at the same time. So, that was an advantage, presumably.
It was. Pay and grading was probably the key aspect of the project, but actually we identified that there were other aspects of the contracts that needed modernising, and we needed to have a look at. So we made the conscious decision to really pull that all together into one round of consultation, rather than further down the line having to go through that process again.
Excellent, yeah. And it all came to the end where there was a vote, and I believe the initial vote was a bit tricky.
Yeah, so what happened there, the teaching union actually went to formal dispute with the college. That wasn't a particular surprise because, clearly there were some changes to terms and conditions of their members that they weren't signing up to and weren't necessarily agreeing with. So we tried to resolve that informally at the college level, and that wasn't fruitful. So we called in ACAS actually to really facilitate a way forward with the dispute. And we had ACAS on site for 2 days, and we worked with them and the unions to actually reach an alternative agreement to the original proposals. An agreement was then taken to members of that union. And narrowly, 52% actually did not sign up to that agreement, and it was declined. Therefore, the dispute continued. And there was some industrial action. There were a number of a few strike days during a week. And we then went back to the union to say, look, is there nothing further that we can do? It's in the interest of every party to resolve this. They then took a slightly amended agreement back to their members, to which 92% actually agreed that they wanted to accept it, which was, I think, fortunate for all parties, because what that meant, the college could collectively agree those changes, all of those changes. Yeah. We held firm on the pay and grading structure. That didn't change in terms of its original proposals, which really helped with, obviously meeting the targets around our finances. So that agreement was reached and agreed, and we then were able to implement the changes to terms and conditions for all staff.
So a very successful outcome, and even using ACAS or employing ACAS, and it all worked out.
Yeah,
very well
and I think bringing ACAS in was actually hugely helpful in terms of moving that dispute forward. Yeah.
Interesting. And if you were able to change one thing about the project, what would you have changed?
I don't think we quite anticipated perhaps the level of anxiety for some staff as far as job evaluation was concerned. And with any project, I think you can't communicate enough in terms of things like that. So actually, in hindsight, more communication initially in terms of what job evaluation is, what it isn't, what it means for staff would have helped to minimise their anxiety. What we ended up doing as we worked through the project, when we had staff briefings at the point that we were moving forward with the proposals, we covered elements of job evaluation within those briefings just to kind of ensure that the staff had the full context of the project.
Yes, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because it's always a very personal thing. You know, why have I been picked for job interview? And in terms of pay and grading, how's it going to affect me? You know, that's what staff always think, and they always think that they've been singled out. And is there a reason? You know, is there a hidden agenda? And of course, it's not. It's not the case at all, is it? But I think it's been a very successful outcome, and to be congratulated. So thank you very much, Becky, and good luck for the future.
Thanks, Dennis.